Welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery Artist Talk series for our current show, the 2021 Biennial Juried Exhibition, juried by April Tsunami, Jessamy Jones, and Kevin Lyles. Today, we're thrilled to present James Mellick, one of our 53 exhibiting artists. But first, there are, of course, just a few housekeeping items to go over. Everyone tuning in today is in listen-only mode, but that doesn't mean that you have to stay silent. Feel free to utilize the chat or Q&A functions there in your control panel and ask questions. We'll monitor those questions throughout the presentation, and we'll be sure to leave plenty of time at the end to answer all of them during the Q&A portion of the hour. Next, live captioning is available for this artist talk, and you can access those captions by clicking on the closed caption icon and selecting Show Subtitle. Also, please keep in mind that because we're presenting from separate locations, there may be some variation of bandwidth for internet stability. So if one of us freezes up or the sound kind of fluctuates, thank you in advance for bearing with us. I promise we'll keep on rolling through any technical difficulties. Okay, thanks all. Now to you, Jim.
Thank you. My name is James Mellick, and I want to thank the Ohio Arts Council for asking me to share my story, and I thank the jurors for including my entry in this year's Ohio Arts Council's Biennial Exhibition. As a 74-year-old artist entering my sixth decade of making art, I have been blessed very late in my career. 2019 was the pinnacle of career exhibits at the Airborne and Special Operations Museum in North Carolina, the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Virginia, the National Museum of the United States Air Force at Dayton, Ohio. Today, I totally owe the recognition for my art to a broader populace outside of the Art Academy and the Art Museum. This slideshow will show how I arrived at this point so late in my life. In my 5 decades as an active artist, I was employed as an educator for 18 years and survived by the art market for 34 years. There were many years between teaching gigs that my art income was below the poverty line. I owe my success to my wife, Marcia, my helper and partner of 52 years. Without her, none of this past or future would be possible. When I was not teaching, her career as a medical technologist allowed me to be a stay-at-home dad, making art and being with my girls. She was my grant and my national endowment for the arts during the poverty line years. She has been my anchor, not weighing me down, but keeping my feet on the ground. She manages the finances and pays the bills, and I've had to offer what I haven't offered in return is an interesting life of serendipity and surprise. Besides visual art, my other passions and amateur interests are charity gardening and music. In 2020, during the pandemic, our charity gardens produced over 4,000 pounds of fresh vegetables, which my wife and I picked and delivered to local food pantries. Since visual art is my profession, music has been my hobby for most of my life, and I've enjoyed the immediate reward of performing to a live audience. I was born in Mansfield, Ohio in 1947. My father was a minister and my mother was a dutiful, devoted preacher's wife who held together a family of 5 boys and managed the meager resources. I learned critical thinking, study, and debate from my father, who had a large library in the church. I learned creative survival from my mother, who clipped coupons, canned vegetables, taught crafts in vacation Bible school, and made some of her own furniture in the home. She managed the finances to spread the $75 a week minister salary to feed 5 active boys. If I had any privilege, it was being part of a loving and intact family who found a way to provide, progress, and then thrive. My oldest brother, Richard, escaped the small town by going into the Marines, where he spent 25 years after serving in Vietnam. The 4 remaining brothers, including myself, were the first in our family to earn college degrees. David, my second brother, earned his doctorate in philosophy and taught at the Ohio State University. My younger twin brothers, Larry and Gary, went on to become doctors through the Army Medical Corps and after graduating from the university. After they left the Army, they rose to the top of their fields in emergency medicine and neurology. I was very close to my brother David. We both enjoyed painting, music, and I valued his wisdom. After graduating from high school in 1965, I left Wellington, Ohio to attend Greenville University in Southern Illinois, where I pursued two BA majors, one in sociology and the other one was in art. When I graduated from college in 1969, I had a provisional certificate for K through 6 elementary art, where I taught at Highland, Illinois for 2 years. I was recruited into graduate school during my senior year in college. While teaching during the day, I took evening classes at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville toward the Master of Fine Arts program. And by 1972, I was in graduate school full time. The graduate faculty referred to me as a Renaissance student because my MFA was in painting, but I had a minor in sculpture and extensive work in printmaking. I believe my shaped canvas acrylic paintings, which the graduate faculty called totems, were an innovative addition to the contemporary art at that time. The careful craftsmanship and structuring of the structure frames was a harbinger for my carved constructions in wood. In 1973, I was awarded the Graduate Award for Excellence in Design. In 1972, the pop artist Robert Indiana awarded 2 totems purchase awards in a regional exhibition at the Swope Museum in Terre Haute, Indiana. My graduate experience was ideal for small colleges and small art departments because I could cover more than one studio medium. In my career as an art professor, I've taught painting, drawing, printmaking, 2D and 3D design, sculpture, and art history. It was in New Hampshire that I turned from painting to wood sculpture, and I experimented with the antiquity form of the torso. One of my first major sculpture exhibitions was a group show at Hopkins Center, Dartmouth College, curated by Jan Vondermark, noted 20th century art critic and museum director, whose support I enjoyed for many years. He admired the way that I blurred the barriers between painting and sculpture. In a short time, I was recognized as a sculptor in New Hampshire. Of course, at that time, the population of New Hampshire was smaller than Franklin County, Ohio. I was a big fish in a small pond. I left New Hampshire in 1978 to take a new position at Houghton College in Western New York, and where I fell into the black hole of academia. I was brought in to start their first art major program, and over the next 3 years, I wrote the curriculum, hired faculty, and had the program approved in record time. Very little personal work of any significance took place. I kept reminding the administration of their promise for a new art building in 3 years, and they decided to let me go because my expectations were too high for the art department's present level of development, is what they said. It was late in 1981, and by that time, most teaching positions had been filled. We moved our young family back to Ohio, where my brother David provided a home next to his where we could live. With my unemployment check, I was able to purchase my first woodworking equipment and set up shop in the basement. I became a home dad, and Marcia started her full-time career as a medical technologist and the primary breadwinner. Much of my drive in the early 1980s was a resolve to overcome the darkness and loss experienced at the start of the decade. In 1980, my mother died of cancer. In 1981, I lost my teaching position. In 1983, my closest brother died of a rare stomach cancer. And after inheriting the care of my father from my brother, in 1984, my father died of complications of Parkinson's. By 1985, there was nowhere to go but up, and I sunk myself into the art production. The irony is, if I had not been forced to leave Houghton College, I would not have been near my brother, who had only 2 years to live. nor would my art career have flourished in a larger city. In 1983, before the Short North existed, Gallery 200 on West Mount Street, directed by Renee Steidel, was a major player to the top Ohio artists. It was there that I had my first commercial exhibit with work accumulated from graduate school, from my tenure in New Hampshire, and new work created in my basement. It had great reviews in both newspapers at that time. Paraphrase Paraphrase 1982, an installation of 12 apostle birds, where 11 self-involved and preening parrots who ignore the Darth Vader Judas vulture in their midst. It really appealed to baby boomers, parrot heads. It was my first full-blown animal allegory. This display at Gallery 200 led to several commissions. The installation was entered in the Fine Arts exhibit at the 1984 Ohio State Fair and won the $2,500 Best of Show in the professional division. 2 years after my late brother won Best of Show in the amateur division. I'm sure he was amused in heaven. That award would have equaled $6,500 in today's money. It went a long way for my young family finding financial security again. One can only exhibit a piece like this without compensation so many times, and I never break up a winner into parts, so I ended up donating the installation to the Schumacher Gallery at Capital University. From 1983 to 1995, I created and sold over 250 fantasy bird sculptures through juried craft fairs and galleries around the country. These were a celebration for me and a temporary return to the Garden of Eden. It is at this point in my talk that I would like to show you groupings of sculptural forms that have recurred throughout my career. The first are wall reliefs, which fed my need for 2D composition as I was moving away from the traditional paintings on canvas. In these, my compositions relied upon the natural colors of wood, and they all began with a drawing, which is fundamental to everything I do. Early reliefs were limited to the rectangle and then progressed to using the open spaces of the wall, free from the box. The most recent installation will probably never be seen in Central Ohio since it's in a university collection, but I feel that it's one of the best relief installations that I've done. While I was teaching printmaking, painting, and drawing, I found it necessary to produce in those media and give the students confidence that I knew what I was talking about. These paintings were created when my mother was dying of cancer. The rainbow loses its color and then becomes an exploded target. For a wood carver, it was natural to move from silkscreen to woodcuts. When I was out of the academy and working full-time in the studio, sculpture always seemed to trump all else. The next theme is the female figure, mostly from 1996 through 1990. In 1996, I took my work to the Navy Pier, Sculptural Objects and Functional Art in Chicago. I enjoyed sending up antiquity sculptures with names such as Nike of Some Other Place and Victory on One Wing. In 2000, figurative work turned to satire with The Tired Old Liberal. And now and then, when I create a masterpiece, and I knew that would catch the eyes of the judges, and I usually do pretty well with multiple objects and to make an installation, I would not make these things if I wasn't excited about the process and the content. But these wonderful pieces are either given away to a museum or are sitting in storage in the barn loft. I have to figure out if I'm serving the people or the judges. Arsenal won Best of Show in the sculpture at the Three Rivers Arts Festival in Pittsburgh, and the Award of Excellence at Works Off Walls at the Huntington Gallery's in West Virginia. I am not a one-track mind with parable-telling dogs. The meaning and the intent of the piece often requires a change of animal species. I am sorry that I do not have time to go into more detail with the stories behind these pieces. I'm letting these liturgical designs lead off the following for their own organic character. Now and then, I enjoy the formality of my modernist abstract thinking by doing smaller sculptures tied to my interest in biology and the fantastic. These are anthropomorphic and surreal and have won awards of their own. And I have great fun with subversive titles as well. These represent my credo that dreams and imaginations become believable and real in the finely crafted and finished object. That may sum up how I work. As an art professor, I had to rely upon summers, weekends, and vacations to create my own artwork. Much of my creative energy was spent on my students when I was teaching. So I will include work by my Cedarville students that I may have inspired. And with the background and the art history presented, we reach the halfway point of this talk. I love dogs and they love me. I know that different artists throughout history have been known for focusing on certain subjects like ballerinas, haystacks, lily ponds, self-portraits, sunflowers, prostitutes, and nightlife. I selected the dog as my main character of allegory because they are man's best friend and confidant. Dogs own us as much as we own them. They know our secrets, and I try to get them to talk and reveal things about ourselves, human nature, and our relation to the natural world, and the beautiful and the ugly in the world. In 1985, Stacking Dogs was entered in an all-Ohio sculpture competition in Columbus and won the Best of Show. And I've been telling a story of man's nobility and inhumanity with dogs ever since. The styles and the designs of the dogs have evolved over the years. Yes, the dogs are climbing on each other's backs, from the Irish Wolfhound at the base, making the Chihuahua the top dog at the top in order to see where they are going. But the piece is more about the blind leading the blind and corporate groupthink. The dogs have no eyes and they have blinders and they're facing in opposite directions. Compared to later work, this design and construction is fast, raw, and decoratively primitive. It was sold to a collector and the whereabouts is unknown. Here We Go Again, created shortly after, sold to an unknown collector in Chicago. I had Escher in mind for this yin and yang, dog-eat-dog world and tit-for-tat aggression. President Reagan had just bombed Gaddafi in Libya. The General's Willie, or Patton's Willie, 1986, could be seen as a light-hearted forerunner of my military working dogs. But this was more cheeky, where I began relating dogs to imagined dogs to their historical figures. Farrell's Hound, and there is such a breed as Farrell's Hound, 1987, is about modern plagues and the AIDS. Da Vinci's Dog, 1987, was my response to the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986. Burning of Old Yeller, 1988, was my response to the burning of Yellowstone Park that same year. In 1989, after an exhibition at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, I was invited to teach sculpture and drawing. I thought my move was permanent, but due to the stock market crash of 1987, and there's always a lag time when it comes to college enrollments after a stock market crash, college enrollments were down 300 students. And since I was the last one hired, I was first to be let go in 1991, once again. As Providence would have it, our home in Gehenna, Ohio had not sold, and we had a home and studio waiting for our return. While at Calvin, I created Before the Oil, 1990, which was first displayed on Earth Day. And it was my response to the oil spill of the Exxon Valdez in 1989, during my first year at Calvin. American She-Wolf, 1991, was inspired by the horrific tragedy of a college friend whose estranged husband took their 2 children out of school and set himself and the children on fire on a Tennessee exit ramp. Of course, there was a frantic search to find a faculty position once again, but there were few opportunities for an older white male with my experience. White privilege was not a thing at that time, but my age, gender, and race was getting me nowhere when it came to teaching positions. That experience inspired the politically incorrect dog, or PID, that lifts his leg on the College Art Association position announcement. You can decipher the rest of the parable for yourselves. This work won Best of Show at the 1993 Columbus Arts Festival. During the 1990s, I bypassed the local art scene dominated by the Ohio State University and focused on the national recognition of the contemporary craft movement that was replacing the dying galleries that were dying because of the stock market crash of 1987, actually. They were still catering to the cutting edge fluff of the 1980s. So much for Julian Schnabel. As an aside, I settled for contemporary craft galleries in New York and Chicago, and I simply began to travel with my work to Juried Arts Festival. My wood sculpture was featured and written about in national woodworking magazines, international craft magazines, and college textbooks. In 1996, I was invited to teach wood sculpture at the Penland School of Crafts. It was a great, intense experience with very talented graduate level students. I never had much of a chance in my lifetime to teach graduate level students, and it was really great. It was just like it was like eating the center of a watermelon. You know, it was a great experience. In 1997, on my 50th birthday, I decided that I would take 2 years off and create a very big sculpture. I would build our modest timber frame dream home on country acres outside of Marysville, Ohio. I could never afford to pay someone to build a custom home, but hey, I'm a wood sculptor after all. The Amish created the timber frame, and I paid someone to do the plumbing and the mechanical. But with the help of my son-in-law and a few friends, I constructed and finished the home. 2 years later, I built a studio barn with a room in the loft for small classes. I had the idea of having my own art school, which lasted about 1 summer. And then I limited my instruction to apprentices who could help me out in the garden and on the farm. During the early 2000s, I served as a teaching adjunct at Columbus College of Art and Design, Ohio Northern University, and the Urbana University. In the last year of the 20th century, I created what I think is my most significant works before the Wounded Warrior Dog's installation. Witness Kosovo Dog was done in 1999. It was the first dog created in the basement of our new home. It is about discovering the mass graves after the Kosovo War. Little did I know how closely the sculpture would match the pictures of the unearthed mass burial sites that were published later. This piece is in the permanent collection of the Evansville Art Museum. The early 2000s brought more wood sculptures that won awards in the Ohio Craft Museum's Best of exhibits, and work that I created exhibited at an American Craftsman gallery in New York City. These canine allegory were more humorous and lighthearted, including Bird Dog, which you see here. Blown Away, Dog Tricks Table, which is after my Weimaraner, Heidi. Very often I use my dogs as models, and they get immortalized in that way. Mama Opek, which is about Holly, who gave us 3 litters of Weimaraner puppies. And my 2 wiener dogs, Woody and Up on Blocks, which is a vision of retirement for me, the latter. Cardinal Sins 2 and Get Out of Here, which has been shown at the Rife Center Gallery before. At the same time, I was writing short stories to illustrate them. In 2008, I had word that Cedarville University was looking for someone to start their sculpture program, and the savings call for a steady income appealed to my ears once again. I was also going to teach printmaking and drawing. I've gone like full circle now from my first position to my last position, where I was teaching printmaking and drawing. This time, I would not move my home and studio, but drive 100 miles each day round trip. I was now 60 years old. On September 16, 2009, I had a small heart attack and I had a quadruple bypass and point valve repaired. The school covered my courses, kept me on salary, and when I was back at work the following semester, I had new loyalty to the university. After my heart surgery in 2009, I lived my life as though I was living on bonus time. In football terminology, the fourth quarter went into overtime. I retired from Cedarville University in 2014. I am not a veteran, and I had no interest in going to Vietnam. I enjoyed a college deferment and a high lottery number while I was in graduate school. While I was in college, 6 of my schoolmates from Wellington High School, a school of 400 students, were killed during the Tet Offensive in 1968. I've always had a sense that they died in my place. After 9/11, we had a much clearer purpose for going to war. We had been attacked on our own soil. We now had a volunteer military of middle-class men and women who went to war on my behalf and put themselves in harm's way. I saw them returning with multiple amputations, and it seemed worse injuries than the Vietnam War, probably because improved medical technology in the field has our troops surviving traumas, including brain injuries that would have been fatal in Vietnam. At the same time, if we did not have family members who volunteered and were in harm's way, our lives went on as normal, and we were pretty much untouched by the war. We had to sacrifice nothing. The stock market was great. It was easy to look away from those who came home physically scarred. At the same time, the Veterans Administration was drawing attention for misappropriations of funding and the bureaucratic red tape in meeting the needs of veterans. In 2015, the idea came to create Wounded Warrior Dogs as an allegory or parables for our wounded veterans as a means of reminding people of their sacrifice and our debt to them. Letting the dogs tell the story added a whole new emotional level to seeing the sacrifice of the human wounded warrior in a new way. If we couldn't look at humans, we might look at dogs. The idea was to create these canine proxies to stand for the wounded veterans that served in recent wars. The injuries and the prosthetics are more human than they are canine. They would represent the typical injuries suffered in those wars. Beginning in early 2015, I would number and title the dogs in order that I created them. And I always had in mind installation of dogs, so I just took one at a time. Wounded Warrior Dog number 1, Iraq, was a Belgian Malinois representing a wounded veteran from the campaign in Iraq, injured by a roadside explosion. It has a prosthetic leg, a metal plate in the head, and is blind in one eye. Wounded Warrior number 2, Afghanistan, was a Malinois in a wheelchair sling with both legs missing. This represented an IED casualty that became quite prevalent when the global war on terror switched to Afghanistan. Wounded Warrior number 3, Not Forgotten, was the first dog to represent the Vietnam wounded veteran and the missing in action veteran who never came home. In addition, 4,000 military working dogs were left in Vietnam as well, either to be reappropriated or euthanized. The first 3 dogs were entered in the Fine Arts exhibit. At this point, I went back and added service ribbons to the collars of the dog to represent the era and the wars that they served. I was creating a new Wounded Warrior dog every 2 months. The motivation and the ideas flowed quickly. The first 3 dogs were entered in the Fine Arts exhibition at the Ohio State Fair in 2015. And while they were ignored by the jurors, I found out that they had won the People's Choice Award at the end of the exhibit. That was my first indication of how popular they would become. In July 2015, I had completed Wounded Warrior Dog number 4, Sniffer, a bomb detection chocolate Labrador named Cece, who served in Iraq and represented the human Iraqi veteran. It was unique that she was designed to stand on the floor and sniffing above a barrier. By the end of 2015, I finished the largest of the dogs, but this time it was a German Shepherd beat up, starving, and making his way back to base. Wounded Warrior Dog number 5, also representing the Vietnam veteran, was titled The Way Back. It would have been titled Welcome Home as well. The president of the Vietnam Dog Handlers Association invited me to bring the 3 dogs to their reunion that October in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a very emotional display for the veteran dog handlers, and on the final day, I was awarded a certificate of appreciation and made an honorary member of the Vietnam Dog Handler Association. In the spring of 2016, I completed 2 more Wounded Warrior Dogs to bring the number to 7. Number 6, Blessing and Mercy, was a Doberman with a white dove on its back, representing the greatest generation of the departed veteran of World War II. The dog's ribbon represents service in the South Pacific. Wounded Warrior number 7, Under the Flag, represents the ultimate sacrifice and suggests the remains of the dog in a box. The piece takes the display to a deeper level of emotion. At the beginning of 2016, I decided to find a venue to display the Wounded Warrior Dogs in Art Prize 8 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was interviewed by the staff of the Amway Grand Plaza Hotel, and the installation was accepted to be displayed for 20 days. Even though on the second day of the exhibit, people were telling me that I would be the winner, my intent was to serve the wounded veterans, and I had no intent or would I allow it to enter my mind that I might actually win an award. Hundreds and then thousands of viewers came by the Wounded Warrior Dogs display every day and cast their votes by phone. The installation became more of a real-time happening and a cathartic event of healing as I met many of the veterans that the Wounded Warrior Dogs were representing. The emotions were so strong that the hotel had to set out several boxes of tissues. At the end of the International Art Exposition, where 1,540 artists from 44 countries were represented, the Wounded Warrior Dogs were awarded the $200,000 grand prize by public vote in all categories. The national and the international media attention was immediate. It was perhaps the first and the last time that my name would ever appear in the magazine Art Forum. Art Prize would not share the number of votes earned, but from the lines waiting to see the display, I believe the dogs won by the largest margin ever. Like in Charlotte's Web, everyone is curious of the winning entry, and on the final day, the line to the work stretched 400 feet. As I promised, I donated a tenth of the winnings to the wounded veterans organizations, primarily the Canines for Warriors charity. After the win, I was justly banned from ever entering Art Prize again. The mission and the development of the Wounded Warrior Dogs did not end with Art Prize, and it has set attendance records at many venues. Many people brought up the hidden wound of PTSD, and that did not end with Art Prize. And many people brought up the hidden wound of PTSD. So at the beginning of 2017, I added Wounded Warrior Dog number 8, Flashback, to the display. In 2018, I began a second series titled Canine War Stories. The focus was to tell the story of canine teams who made sacrifices mostly in the global war on terror. These stories are brought to my attention through books and firsthand accounts of veterans and even some Facebook friends. This meant inserting myself into the lives and gaining the confidence of families who experienced tragic losses. In the end, they were appreciative that their story was being told. I've heard positive reports of the emotional healing of the veteran dog handlers involved. Patrick Tucko and Jojo R620, both dog and handlers, survived an IED in Afghanistan. Over the Rainbow Bridge is about the friendships of Corey Wines and Chris Willingham and their dogs on a forward operating base in Iraq. Corey D. Wines and Cooper K154 were the first canine team killed in action in the global war on terror. Chris Willingham returned home to work for the Marines, and Luca K458 went on to serve in Afghanistan, where she lost a leg from an IED before she was retired. Waiting to Go is about veteran suicide. of Airman David Simpson in 2017. David Simpson was dealing with PTSD and the recurring pain from Lyme disease, and he took his own life. The Air Force Museum Foundation flew David Simpson's family from Florida to see the sculpture of Robson LO96 for the first time. The sculpture of Flex, multipurpose canine, memorializes the sacrifice of Marine David Sonka and Flex, who were killed by an Afghan soldier they were training. Judy POW 81A is my most recent Canine War Story and is included in the Biennial Exhibition at the Rife Center Gallery. It tells the story of the struggle to survive for both Frank Williams and Judy in the jungles and the Japanese prison camps in the South Pacific during World War II. Of course, private commissions continue to sustain my mission, but the downside is they may never be seen in public again. This slide shows the journey of the Wounded Warrior Dogs mission, where they have been and where they will be exhibited in the next 2 years. And on this last slide, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to share my work with you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Folks, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the comments or into the Q&A, and we will get to them. Jim, let's go ahead and stop share, and then you and I can just chat about the work a little bit. Does that sound okay?
All right, stop share. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so I will pin both of us, and then that will make it so that, yeah, there we go. All right. So tell me a little bit, you clearly had a vast history of multimedia. I love that you kind of tie together the myriad talents that you have within each of your endeavors. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit of the process of creating your current day works. Like tell us what's a day in the studio, and how do these come to fruition?
Well, it does not seem as though I accomplished much in one day in the studio, but I can give you sort of the overall process. Very often what will happen is something will move me emotionally. And so like is the pen mightier than the sword? I'm kind of old school about, make an art piece about that, of something, if you want to make a statement about something. And so I am very much statement oriented and narrative oriented in that way. But I also, in my tradition, I believe and I understand the purpose of the parable. And rather than putting something in someone's face in an angry and furtive way, is to try to find a redeeming way of making the point that where you're not going to be turning off half of the viewership, that something still has beauty and something still has content, even though it may be dealing with a very difficult subject matter at the same time. So let's say in the case of the military, a dog, the canine allegory. First of all, is there a certain species of the dog that would carry the story? For example, a dog up on blocks talking about retirement, which is more the lighter side of things, or the dog standing on end, excuse me, because he got into some Viagra pills, as in Woody, the little wiener dog. So there's always sort of a tongue-in-cheek. There's a tongue-in-cheek aspect to the humor in a sort of a Thurbian sort of way, but then there is the heavier stuff that came with the Wounded Warrior Dogs project itself. And let's say, for example, the Kosovo Dog of finding all the mass burial graves. I would begin with, let's talk about Kosovo Dog, for example. I wanted to find a dog which was a part of, I could not find a dog that represent Kosovo, So I got sort of the Anatolian shepherd's dog, which is the Turkish dog, pretty much in the same area. And then I have to find the right wood color. And then I'm doing these sketches because gesture is very important to convey. Is the dog sick? The dog's about ready to vomit. His head is low to the ground. If you watch the dog getting ready to vomit, you kind of know what that posture is going to be. And what is he vomiting? Well, he's giving up the evil that's inside him. You know, these bodies that are unearthed, and the bodies beginning to crack open like earth. And so that's the allegory of the earth revealing what was hidden. The dog's eyes, for example, the figures are covered with the figures are carved wood, maybe over 100 pieces of figures that were different and then put together, and then they were urethane, then covered with white sand. So it looks like those, the Pompeii figures that were cast in plaster. You know, they found that where the body was revealed. So then even the eyes were colored the same way because the eyes are seeing these figures. So that I'm drawing that connection between the eyes of the dog and what's in the body. On the first look, it looks like guts. It looks like viscera. And then you get closer to it. Oh, those aren't bowels. Those are figures. And that's a little gentle slap that will wake up. It's a little twist that I think a realization of the second look at something. But what gets you to that second look is the beauty of the wood. And if you didn't have the beauty of the wood, I don't think you're going to look deeper into the parable or deeper into the thought process. Okay, so I got the gesture, I had the drawing, I enlarged the drawing to a full scale. Now I have parts of patterns that I cut the drawing up into patterns. And it's all assemblage. I'll build it up, I'll block up the wood just for the purpose of carving it back down again. So I don't carve from logs, but I use dimensional lumber, and then I build it up and I carve and size it and then put it together again. And then perhaps once I get the rough sanding, I say maybe 50% of the time, these pieces take between 160 to 200 hours to finish. And I say half of the time is in hand sanding. So it touched me, patient, wax on, wax off, it's sort of a little Zen moment there going on where I'm just sort of being very patient and listening to stories, listening to books on tape as I'm working. So that's kind of like the process during the day, and then, getting there, blowing off the dust every day before I go in the house.
That's great. So you mentioned a bit about craftsmanship, and anyone that sees your work in person recognizes the extraordinary craftsmanship that you have in your work. There's something else that you talked a little bit about, and I really enjoy the fact that you recognize that there are many avenues to success in the arts, and going through your fine craft arena allowed for access for you, particularly given the level of craftsmanship that you have in your work. Could you talk a little bit about how you came to these hand skills? Like, I clearly, within the works that were referenced as totems, at the beginning of your career, you started the development of craftsmanship there. So can you maybe help the audience understand what you consider to be, what allows this to be considered phenomenal craftsmanship, how you get there, and how someone might pursue that personally?
Well, of course, there's the trite thing, there's practice, 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 but there has to be a little bit of obsessive compulsion involved as well, and patience, and looking at other people's work, and going to, I mean, the idea of, if I'm creating something which is sort of a form, let's say within abstractions, that it never existed before. So my idea, you create something so finely and so finished that the reality of its existence can't be denied, because it's tactile, and there it is. And it's like I'm giving birth to these forms, and there is labor involved in giving birth to these forms. And I think it's the willingness. The willingness is to spend time. I think, for example, I don't, within my own grandchildren, I don't see that patience. I don't. They're going to kill me for this, but I don't see the willingness to take time. But I do think that patience is something learned. Um, and as we go through these changes in our lives, we will go through periods where we have more time for patience. I'm retired, so I have time to spend 160 to 200 hours on a dog and to tell the story. Whereas I'm freed a little bit from the normal thing that a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old person might be tied down with family and so forth. So there is some freeing that takes place as well. I would say that making the work believable, making sure that the work is seen, comes with this care and craftsmanship. And the person, well, what many people have told me is that after some of my collectors, for example, they say they keep discovering things about the work that they had not seen. So within that time, there are layers of meaning, layers and layers of meaning put on top, that things that I'm thinking that, why did you put this form next to this form? And why is this there? And those are all the thought processes that are going through my mind. So the connoisseur collector, when they have something hanging on the wall, or then they see something about it for the first time, then that comes with complexity. That comes with a complexity of form, complexity of color, complexity of shapes. And it's like storytelling. There's always this unraveling that takes place because there's layers of content and layers of meaning. And that's the way I think. And sometimes it gets communicated through the work.
That's great. I love that you talked about the layers of meaning, and also the very nature of the creation of these is layered, like very like physically layered.
Right.
We
There
we
there are steps, and very often I have to think several steps ahead because of part of the process. That's part of the craftsmanship thing. And that comes with experience, and that comes with time. Every time, every time I make something, I'm taking that information forward, what I've discovered, to the next project. So the very early dogs, if you remember, they were quite primitive. They were just like single planes, and then every time I learned something. Now some people like to say there will be some people who will prefer that primitive work and say, I just wish you had stayed at that point. But first I learned how to put the toenails in. I learned how to put the eyes in. I find a new way of doing the ears, and every time it might have taken 50 hours to do the first dog, and then it ends up taking 160 or 200 hours because I'm beginning to add these things to it. For example, Judy, that's in the exhibition, I think this is the first time that I did a dog that was hollow inside. And I had to figure out how to do that because everything else, all my other work, begins with a central axis form, a core. And then the core is built around and built out, and then I start subtracting it back from that core, to the core again. In this case, my core was negative. There was nothing on the inside. And so as I'm building out and then I'm shaping back, I'm carving, I said, oh, I don't want to run into that inner volume again. I have to be careful. It's like, you're making a hollow gourd, and you're carving back, and you don't want to get into that hollow. You want to keep on the surface of what you're carving. So that was an experiment. And every time I experiment with something new, I'm adding time onto something, and I may find it's worth the time, or it may not be worth the time. I have to make that decision as I go along.
That's great.
I think whether I answer your question or not, but
yeah, absolutely. I think that the other great thing about you talking about time as kind of a component, it's almost a material when you exercise the amount of time that goes into this work. And I'd love to point people back to the jurors tour, where they talked a lot about the fact that the work that they selected for this exhibition, by and large, you can tell that there is extraordinary time put into these works.
and that's something I noticed. There was a strong craftsmanship contingent to that exhibit this year. And I really appreciated that, especially that Sculpey piece, that little white thing was so delicate, the white, and that's obsessive. That's obsessive working, and that's kind of what that's what I do too. And so
Yeah.
we should have like maybe an obsessive compulsive anonymous art group that we can all get together and obsess together about things. I don't know.
Yeah, that piece that you're referencing is by Wading Way. Yeah, it's really great. And so, folks that haven't had a chance, make sure you have a look at that. We actually do have a question from an audience member,
Mhm.
from John. John said, if dogs could make sculptures of people, what do you think those would look like?
Excuse, please repeat that.
If
If dog,
dogs could create sculptures of humans, what do you think those would look like?
well, their hands would always be near. They would have very big hands, and they would always have a cookie in their hands or something. And um, I'm pretty sure it would be to the dog's advantage in some way. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the
Particularly
fact,
since you
by the
say,
fact, by the fact I don't have a good answer for it. So
well, now you're going to think about it, right?
yeah, I will. I will. That has to be completely screwed up for the rest of the day. I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with that.
We have another question from an audience member. Chiquita asks, your work elicits such powerful emotions. You mentioned writing short stories about the dogs. Is there a collection in progress along with the possibility of a published volume?
I and in exhibitions such as at the Ohio Craft Museum, there were times when I would put up the little stories that I had written to go along with the pieces, and people were telling me that they enjoyed the stories as much as they did the work. I kind of had in mind, there was okay. So when I want to make an artist statement, I did not want to. People like to discover things about works themselves, right? So they don't want to be told, "Oh, this means this and this means that." No, they want to discover it themselves. So I didn't. I pulled back from saying what my intent was, and I found a more creative way of explaining my work was to write the story to go with the work, and it was kind of a backdoor way of making sure that the point was put across. And then I found out that well, I kind of enjoy doing these stories themselves, and it was still creative. It allowed a lot of ladder for individual interpretation. I wasn't telling people what to think or how to think about them. It's just what I was feeling. So in this case, for the first time, usually you make art to illustrate a story, whereas I reverse it and I write the story to illustrate my art. And that was kind of the thought process in that. And yeah, I thought about and maybe the book. Make sure I say how many years I have. I was thinking about that writing a book. It probably would be something like it would be a very enjoyable coffee table book, I suppose. I haven't done my coffee table book yet in my life, so I better get on it.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a good plan.
I mean,
If folks,
you have the image on one side and you have the story on the other side. And I like Garrison Keillor. I mean, and I like The Far Side. That's kind of the way my mind works. Yeah.
that's great. So when can people expect that to come out? Just kidding. Where can people find those stories, or do you have them on your website?
No, not at this time, but
Okay,
I may put them on my Facebook page, which is a quick way to publish them at some point. Yeah.
absolutely.
I think there was a time on my Facebook page when I went from my very beginning and I went through, I think it was during COVID, every day I would put a new piece of artwork up and then I had kind of the stories with it that I could recycle those. I do believe.
Wonderful. So, one, congratulations on being a part of the biennial. That's a huge honor to be selected from nearly 1,800 pieces that were entered. That's really cool, and we're glad to have your work as a part of this exhibition. Um, I
And
am.
could I also mention where the Wounded Warrior dogs are right now?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
now they are at the Greenville, South Carolina, at Furnham University. They are in the Upcountry History Museum, and they are on display there. And then they will be going to the AKC Museum of the Dog in New York City for the summer, and being there for Fleet Week when all the ships come in and the sailors come ashore. So that's nothing given the pandemic and everything, nothing can be planned very well. So that's with that caveat, I say that's where they're going to be, and we'll see actually if they end up being there. But they are down in Greenville, South Carolina right now, and they are open if you're in the Greenville, South Carolina area.
That's great. And I do recommend, we have some great images of this work online, but there's nothing quite like seeing it in person. So if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, usually when people say, "Oh, I thought they were small. I didn't realize they were this large." That I guess they're thinking, and that would be lovely if they were this small, right? Because my arthritis is, coming through, and these dogs are getting bigger, and when am I going to quit? It's probably when I can't lift them anymore. Or I will work smaller again. I'll go back to 3/4 size. But
Or you could just do the smaller dogs.
Well, yes, I could go through life with toy dogs and chihuahuas and Shih Tzus, and I can't pronounce Shih Tzu, but other than that, I could, the little dogs in our lives.
Absolutely.
Nipping at our heel. Yep.
So Jim, I just want to give you an opportunity if there's anything that you'd like to close out with before I do our final closeout. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, and well, just, thank you for the opportunity. And I probably pretty much have said everything I want to say at this point. And they can also ask questions online if they need to.
Absolutely. Jim is really active on Facebook. So if you have really enjoyed this work, be sure that you go ahead and connect with him.
Yeah, the Wounded Warrior Dogs mission page is the main page for this group that I'm working on now. And then there's a James Mellick art page as well. So too many pages. Yes, I realize.
Perfect.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you all again for joining us for this artist talk by James Mellick as a part of our programming for the 2021 Biennial Juried Exhibition. I'd like to give a special thank you to our jurors, April Tsunami, Jessamy Jones, and Kevin Lyles, as well as to the Ohio Arts Council's board, the Ohio legislature, and the governor who support the OAC, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks and have a great day.
Bye.